actually happen to have been, I don't know, I developed a different view about all this than a lot of people. Now, I would call myself progressive because I believe in progress, right? It might be liberal, it might be conservative. Now, right now, we need some liberal progress, in the U.S. It might be that we need conservative progress other places. I think, that's how it goes. Not that those are great categories, liberal and conservative, but, well enough, at least because for communication we understand a little bit about what is meant. But the idea of progress has more to do with, building things. And, okay, well, that's better. It's like, do we need a post office? I don't know. But if you have a post office, it's some sort of progress. If it turns out you didn't need it, I don't know. What if you spent so much you didn't build a hospital and you go, oh, we should have built a hospital, now we're all dead. Okay, so progress can be tricky, but it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. Piero, let's build a hospital first. You can progress, right? And there's ideas, and you're allowed to try to progress, and it falls back. And, there is a way to approach social policy to just try to improve the situation. Okay, so with racism, there's obviously people have a problem, and there's a history of problems in the whole world. Actually, the United States has a certain kind of racism, but if you ask me, I think the racism of Europe is the most insidious. That's the source of the almost, right? Like it's the worst, because almost in other like Asian cultures that have a lot of like an ethnic bias, you might say, it's still less racist. It's like, they don't want their children to marry those people, but they don't want to go out and lynch them. You know what I mean? It's there's a witch hunting thing to the European idea of all of this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just anti my own culture or something, whatever. That might be an element of this, by the way. But I don't really think so. I think the major thing is that, okay, so what I was going to start with, 3 minutes in, okay, 4 minutes in, what I was going to start with, by the way, have I ever told you guys that if I have a longer video, it's probably the first couple minutes are like this barrier. Have you ever seen your inside graphs people like drop like that? It's like, that's the barrier. You have no idea how much bullshit you can cut out of the comment section just by making that part something a lot of people will drop out of. So I consider it a sort of art form to make it, somewhat interesting, like in the sense of a cone or a haiku. But if you're short on time, just I just shoot in like 3 or 4 minutes. You know what I mean? Because I consider that like the gate. Like if it's a castle, it's a big gate, and that's the gate. Can you get through it? Can you get through it? And I know many of you can, but I'm just telling you, you can also just teleport past the gate like 4 minutes in. Okay. What was I talking about? Racism? Something? Alright. Well, I don't really want to talk about racism. Let's talk about this Australian group that's doing quantum computers in silicon. That's what I find really interesting, because I've spent a lot of time as a programmer. I've been thinking, what would a quantum computer programming language look like? So I go and I watch quantum computing experts lectures, and with MIT you can actually literally watch the classes they teach, which is pretty good. And I read, articles on it and stuff, and it sounds like chemistry. You know what I mean? The quantum algorithm is like, well, then we polarize the atom, and then we this and we that. No thanks. But there's this great Australian group that has created quantum transistors and various things in silicon, which takes advantage of the fact that we know how to print in silicon. And that's pretty useful, right? So, they'll have a quantum bit that involves one or two, phosphorus atoms that they can actually set down in the silicon. They stick really well in silicon. And there's little chambers, for the electron waves to go through and be in their various states. It's pretty impressive, because if they make like a 30 or 40 bit quantum computer, that's actually enough memory to calculate the that's the number of, to have locations for all of the particles in the universe and things like that. It's a tremendous amount of power in the quantum computer. So yeah. But anyway, the reason I'm not very racist, I think, is a couple reasons. I mean, one, I learned that I was multiple, races in my ancestry, throughout my life. And I was born in 1967, so I was in the 70s when I was up to 5 years old and stuff. It's like racism was not cool during that period. And basically also, I moved around a lot as a kid, and I went to 2 schools every year for a while. As my mom moved around and tried to find, place to set down roots. If that's what she wanted to do, who knows? It's not in evidence. But so I saw new groups, and I saw groupthink. And for example, one thing I learned is when you go to a new school, how people receive you is based less on your own personality than it is what they're going through. And how you learn that is look, my personality is fairly consistent over a year or even 2 years. And if you go to 4 new groups and they react to you 4 new ways, you're like, one group thinks of me this way, one group thinks of me that way, And it'd be like one group thinks of me as some sort of a crazy rebel outcast, wild man, and one group thinks of me as a smarty pants, goody two shoes, and the next group thinks, And I did this for several years, and I realized, wow, there's some fundamental truth to this experience, in that when you go to a new place and are perceived by a group, and the reputation that group generates for you, it represents more than yourself. It represents what's your interaction with what's going on in that group. And it could be very, I never went through something like this, but I'll use this as an example, just, I think, hopefully it makes sense. Let's say you have blonde hair, and you go into this group, and one of the most popular girls, a brunette, she has a blonde boyfriend, and he knows she loves his blonde hair. Then he has reason to be jealous of you. You have no way of knowing that. It's just a very incidental thing. That's the kind of thing. But it could be anything. It could be Tommy feels he's known as the smartest kid in class. And what he's smart in is, I don't know, military history. And you come and on the first day you talk about military history and this great, I bought this game Bismarck about the great, and he will have a reaction, and so it's very it's emotional. Well, anyway, that's kind of a tangent, because my point was that I developed a sense of really hating groups. You have no idea how extreme my dislike for groups of people. Groupthink, the mass mind. But I don't have that feeling anymore. Oh, no. I've come totally to peace with the thinking of groups. It should be healthy. People need to form groups. But it needs to be healthy, and that seems to be the problem. That seems to be the main problem, is that the group thinking is... When I first started programming, I was doing well, and I was in a yearly review, and I'm like, I love designing this stuff. I want to design big systems, but I don't want to manage people. People, they're a pain in the ass. Fuck them. They're problems. And they actually let me do that. They're like, okay. And they let me design software that dozens of people, eventually hundreds, would work on. But after a year and a half of doing that design, I realized, look, this was really like childish. I don't want to deal with people. I just want to tell them what to do. And I realized that's not really my professed philosophy. That I don't like dealing with people's real problems. Oh, you're sick today, I don't want to deal with that. Oh, you have kids and got something else to do, I don't want to deal with that. And I realized, oh yeah. And then I changed my tune. And I became a lead programmer at the time, and I started studying how groups of people work. And I found that organizing systems where groups of people work, and like democracies, like it's Robert's rules or the other rules, or it's this rules or that, and just various systems of trying to help people work things out, and you focus a lot on differences, right? How do you work out differences? And so anyway, that's why racism is bad. Anyway, no. My point is not in this video that racism is bad, although it obviously is, if bad means anything. But the point is that... What is the point? It's not that racism is bad, although it is bad. The point is that I just have a bias against racism. And while I used to admit, everybody's a little bit racist, and I used to find things too, like I used the word gypped to my 30s until I realized, oh my god, that's about gypsies. And then I realized, well, I have other terms, ripped off and stuff, I don't have to use that. And I'm not overly uptight about it, because I remember it's like, well, yeah, I used it totally innocently. I didn't know what was going on. Why did I stop doing it? Am I obsessive compulsive? No, I've got other words. And yes, to me, in my life, I had accepted, everybody's a little bit racist. So, I scoured my soul for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if I still find things. But I stopped saying, everybody's racist, because what most people mean is that it's only natural to like people of your own skin color. It's like, are you kidding me? I don't find that at all. Most of the people that I've had enmity with have been white. Because you're white, Pierre. Okay, well then we all have more reason to hate our own race than other races, because we interact with them more. I mean, it's individual, man. I've met people of all kinds of cultures and races that agree with me. You know, the underground liberal Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese, you know, whatever. Some of the Germans, not some of the Germans. So, you guys, it's like most of the European, Western kind of cultures, and those that where that's the dominant culture, they're 50-50 split between people that hate each other, liberals and conservatives, Tories and Labor, that hate each other, half and half hate each other. We're affiliated by our race. Why? Well, because I hate half of them. Yeah, I don't think so. Why would, you know, if I think that the Labor Party types in Europe and the Democrat types in America have more reason to like each other, right, than each half of the two societies. And I think that goes for India as well. You know, and again, I think I mentioned earlier, I hate to use liberal and conservative, but that's how simple-minded people are, and we'll all understand that, including myself. We'll all understand that better than some other more esoteric example. But I think there's other affiliations, right? Like, my main, actual, deepest, that I know of, belief on this is free thinkers, skeptics, open-minded people, which doesn't mean you don't make judgments, but open-minded people, I could explain it more, versus dogmatic people. Now, the main way to explain the difference is, you know, dogmatic people will have some book, or metaphorically, a Bible, that is the source, the canon, right? It's appropriate when you're a fan of Lost, and it's like, well, what officially happened in the show versus what's people's interpretations, but in real life not so good, right? Versus free thinking, which is like you assent to what appears to be the case, but when new evidence comes up, then you have to change that because the appearances become better informed. I at a young age questioned racial stereotypes, and I found them wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. Right? Wrong and wrong. Mexicans are lazy, and it's like, I live in California, it's like, looks like they're working pretty hard to me. You know what I'm saying? So, Polish people are stupid. Really? Because I see a few Polish mathematicians and writers and literary. I don't think so. You know, every single one of those, when did they ever pay off? Ever. I mean, it's hard to think of any. And people that joke around, stereotypes are there because they're true, there's a grain of truth. No, yeah, the grain of truth is things like, those Polish are taking our jobs, but they're so stupid. Well, if they're taking your jobs, maybe they're not that stupid. You know, maybe you're just better, right? Maybe they're taking your jobs because they're the fresh immigrants. Mostly what has always turned me off racism is that, as far as I could see, I don't even remember first conceiving this, but it was before my teenage years, that there's a ruling class, right? The people that employs all these immigrants, and they've always been used against each other. Right? Like, for example, let's say there was the Irishmen are coming in. They're hiring these cheap Irishmen. Oh my God, they're taking all our jobs. Well, in a situation like that, it's stupid to hate the Irishmen. He's getting paid less than you. That means he's being taken advantage of. He's doing the same thing you were doing. He's getting paid less. He's being taken advantage of. Oh, I hate him because he was willing to work for less. Scumbag. Think. It's the guy hiring him. If you want to hate anybody, hate the guy hiring him. In reality, what you need to do is create a social net, a social services net, so that if some immigrant wants to do that job for cheaper, you have another job to move on to that maintains your wage or even increases it. I know it's complicated to think about, but anyway. But as far as like stereotypes, like I was challenged by PM, about what do I think about West or East Indians, and frankly I forgot which was which. I still don't remember. But I could go through with what I think about various things. I mean, what do I think about Africans is interesting because they're American. The word African American is an important word because it's definitely its own culture. It's not like an African culture at all. It's more American, but yet just to call it American is, yeah, I'd like to call it American. Jazz is American. Yay! I want to take credit for it, and that's one reason that I'm not going to ever be racist, because it's like, yeah, I want to say blues is an American contribution to the world. Yeah, hey, yep, we did that. We Americans. But it's obviously an American thing that we get from African Americans. Africa itself it's a whole continent, man. There's a lot of things going on there, a lot of different kinds of cultures. I think it's pretty ridiculous to talk about it as one thing. Africans in general, I mean, you really have to go tribe by tribe. Even if you were a racist and you thought that there were all these specific kinds of, well, this tribe's more artistic and this one's better cooking, or whatever you might think, some stupidly specific things. Well, then there's dozens of those, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, in Africa. And it's largely separate from the African American culture. I like the African American culture. I like talking during movies, and I lived in Oakland, and I really there's a lot of things I like about it, especially African American intellectuals. They are a very interesting group of people. How would I characterize? I think there's there's every kind of person. They're not all the same, of course, but I think there's a large number of African American intellectuals that appreciate mythologies, cultural stories. I found they're very interesting with that. There's very many that are interested in sort of engineering history, how America was built. So what else? Okay, Asians, again, pretty big group, right? Indians, I've worked with some Indians. They were, I think India has a good, it has a good engineering tradition. They'll probably do some phenomenal engineering in the coming century. I think China, that's an interesting thing. So this video has become me, anybody watching this late into the video, me just being racist, saying everything I think good about the different races. I think the Chinese, okay, here's what I've realized recently. I was realizing, okay, the Chinese unified China, a long time ago, right around the end of the Roman Empire, if I recall correctly. Please feel free to correct that date. And they had a couple thousand years where there were 7 different kingdoms, the warring states, and that was still pretty much like one unit, common languages and trade during that warring period. So they have like this 5,000-6,000 year old state, mind you, because you could go back further to say that it was one culture, and a huge influence on all of the South Pacific countries, obviously. The thing about the Chinese is that the Chinese, they're the civilization. They've been here longer than us. We did a big upstart, but they're obviously making a comeback. They're obviously going to overtake us and tell us what it's going to be like. I have come to the conclusion that China, it's the civilization. It's the oldest. It's the most real. That's where we got, as far as I know, that's basically where we got the plow and the umbrella and gunpowder, and you go on and on. You see, Rome might have become that, but it fell apart like a tropical storm heading for the big island. China didn't. China just solidified, and the British sort of abused it and knocked it around, but they didn't really take it over in the long run, obviously. So it's always been about China. I mean, since Marco Polo, even the Romans traded with China indirectly along that, basically what would become the Silk Road, and people in the whole, in that area in between the Middle East and India, they went this way and brought stuff back, and this way and brought stuff back, and so that the Romans had Chinese goods, even though very few Romans had ever made it to China, according to recorded history. It's always been about trade with China, basically, and the history of civilization is basically a history of things borrowed from China, and they kind of got over war before we had, and then we brought war to them again, and they resorted to communism, a Western creation. Very ironic, they're very creative, and now they seem to be doing a kind of capitalism, and it'll be interesting what's next, but I think the inevitable part is that the Chinese are going to win this. I mean, whatever the Chinese have in store for us, whatever the plan is, that's what's happening. I mean, that part I know. I don't know what they have in plan, in store, and I don't know. But I know that whatever it is, that's what's going to happen. I mean, obviously, you'd have to be a fucking moron to think our clueless leaders were going to outsmart this 6,000-year-old civilization. It's not going to happen. So, anyway. I had a racist neighbor. Japanese lady, sweet lady. I liked her, and her daughter lived with her at the time, and her granddaughter was my daughter's age and friends with my daughter, and they played a lot. But one time she was mad because her nephew was going to come over and help her in the garden. And he couldn't come. Somebody had called in sick to work and he had to go work at McDonald's. And she told me she was certain it was a Filipino. A Filipino had called in sick to work, because that's what they do. They call in sick and then they just have a party. Which was funny to me. I mean, my main thought was like, if there's any truth to that, I should make more Filipino friends. They're that into partying. But there's a lot of Filipinos in Hawaii and around, and I just found them really hardworking. I mean, my grandmother got Alzheimer's. Filipinos are famous for being nurses and stuff, and being into nursing, and there's some Filipinos, this was in California, that ran what do you call it? I don't know, an assisted living center, right? And they had my grandmother there way before she was at a nursing level, right? And they wanted to keep her, like, they had to help her keep herself clean and stuff, things that they're not supposed to have to do at this level of place, because she had Alzheimer's. And they showed up to her funeral, like 5 or 6 of them, and they were just crying. They just loved my grandmother. And I tell you, their contact with my grandmother was limited to the time when she got so batty from the Alzheimer's that she didn't remember some of us. It was frustrating dealing with her, and they loved her. And that's their job. They loved her, and they had a nice little place with separate little houses with like 2 or 3 bedrooms each, you know what I mean, and around the grounds. And another friend's mother was Filipino in the neighborhood, a friend of my daughter, and a nurse. Pretty hard working, I thought. So it was just a weird kind of thing. So it's like, well, which is true, or are they both true? Filipinos work really hard, and so they like to party, like fighter jet pilots, or is it just not true that they call in sick because they need a mental health day, or I don't. So one of my things is that sometimes there's something true about a culture that you might as well acknowledge, but it still doesn't make me racist. Okay, like gypsies. I mentioned that I used the word gypped. Learned. I didn't even know where it came from, and then I'm like, okay, never mind. Gypsies, interesting people. Kind of like Bohemian, the undercurrents. Just an interesting thing. Now, gypsies have the reputation traditionally of being thieves. And the traditional gypsy culture seems to like, yeah, you can thieve from these people as you come through. So, does that mean you should be a racist fucker about gypsies? I don't think Cher was a thief. If Cher came to my house, I would not be worried that she was going to steal my keyboard. Would you? So my attitude there has always been like this. Like, even if you have some cultural thing that's like, oh, there's an interesting historical thing there. Ooh, blah, blah, blah. Look, we did a study. It's 8 out of 10 people think that if it's not stealing from your relatives, it's okay. My attitude has always been that the 2 out of 10 left over out of 8 from 10, those people are very strong-willed. If their culture is telling them, be a thief, and they're like, no, I don't want to be a thief, they're worth 10 times somebody, a relative of theirs that says, well, I guess I'm supposed to be a thief. 10 times. So I turn my individual sensometer up to factor 100 so I can tell that 10th gradient. You understand what I'm saying? So when I meet this individual, I'm not racist against him. I'm like individual meter up to fine grain, so that I can meet this extraordinary individual, this like a liberal from Texas, Jim Hightower. It's like, you're from Texas, you're probably an asshole, conservative redneck asshole. Then you turn out to be Jim Hightower. No, that's not going to happen. I'm like, oh, you're from Texas? Let me see if you're one in a million. It's all the more important, because the people that are the exception to the rule of their local culture, those are very, very special, rare people. You know what I'm saying? So if you're really convinced that some culture is corrupt, you ought to be very, very careful trying to find individuals from that culture that somehow have resisted corruption. You understand? Because they've got immunity. They're somehow they're the natural. They're the natural. They know how, even when they're raised wrong, with a value system that says, yeah, murder, steal, blah, blah, blah. Not that that ever quite really happens, but anyway. They turn out ethical. So you'll have something to learn from them by the law of individuality. So yes, in vino veritas, motherfucker.